So welcome again to our sessions. Today, this is the second session of a series of 5, which we are planning together, Adam, Cao Xi, David, Chris, and me. I need to remind to people actually that what is happening in this session is not a kind of a workshop like teaching workshop. It's more like an exploration of ideas. This is something we were doing together all this time, communicating with each other. And at some point we decided, we thought that why don't we open this discussion to other people so they can participate and help. So actually what is happening, we're not teaching anyone. We are exploring together with you ideas which we think are interesting for our work for drama. So we started last time with David and Adam when they had the first session on sites, the concept of sites, and especially focusing on site A. And then now, today, we are going to work on site B. I mean, for the people who who didn't participate in the first session, you can still find the material to read in the Padlet. And we're going to put the Padlet again. We're going to send the Padlet again with emails, but you already have it, most of you, I think. So if you like, you can check there what happened the previous session and how it's going to go on from now on. So for today, we have a very nice person who's going to make let's say, the input, Cao Xi from China, Beijing. Actually, it's very, very, very early morning there in Beijing. So he woke up, Cao Xi, just for this session to give his input. You probably read his little short bio in the the description of the sessions. He's working in Beijing in Drama Rainbow, basically, and he's the creative director in Drama Rainbow, and also a director in I don't know how to say that, Zhuangzhou culture.
Yeah,
is it right?
good. Yeah.
Which is based, of course, in Beijing. He's working a lot with drama. He's cooperating with Chris Cooper and other people from the drama world, and he has translated books into Mandarin from English. David's book, for example, Imagining the Real. And he's a very active person, and I think that although he seems very quiet, he has a very, very interesting view of things and very strong, let's say, view on drama. And I always learn something when I hear him speaking. And so I think it's interesting to ask him today to make this input. Now, just a few things more. We are working on site B today. And we're working on contextualizing drama. It's a very interesting term that actually it has a lot of interesting remarks in David's book, Imagining the Real. He's talking a lot on that. And in Adam's book, based on his PhD. So I think if you're interested for more on that, you can buy these books and read more. So I think it's time for Cao Xi now to give us an idea of what we're talking today and how we could work on that.
Thank you, Kostas. I think it's not really humble for me to say that I rather really listen to the other 4 talking. About that they're much more experienced than I am in this field. And at some time in my life and in the life of most of my organization, they've all been our teachers. And but I'm here, I have 10 minutes. Oh, by the way, Kostas, do you want to share about the structure of today? Or shall
Well,
we?
yeah. Well, if I need, yeah. Okay. So Cao Xi will speak to us for a few minutes, for about 15 minutes, and then we're going to go into breakout rooms. In 4 breakout rooms, we'll see how many people in each one. And but before that, we're going to present each one of us the adaptation, the development we have done on a particular idea, which we presented in the last session. Now we decided that it's better if we work on my idea with the phone in a schoolyard in Athens. So people are asked, 4 of us, the 5 of us, were asked to develop this idea, the first idea, into a kind of a side B, story and context, or for a drama. So probably you have already seen that on Padlet and read these 5 different developments. And after Cao Xi, we are going to present them one by one for a few minutes, and then we'll go to breakout rooms where we're going to talk together on questions, concepts, and ideas in relation to these 5 different developments. And then we'll come back in a plenary kind, and we're going to present the main areas which we think is of interest to discuss more on that. This is basically how the structure of the whole session is. And Cao Xi will end by wrapping up in the end.
Yeah. Thank you, Kostas. We just think it'd be useful to work on one specific situation for the purpose of this session, because we're going to talk about Site B, and we're going to talk about contextualization, and it's easier that way for us to work on one situation rather than developing the separate 5. And I think, as you can see, if it's you know, it really show how much our considerations are brought into planning, and further about this one specific situation, and how we each find a different angle to it, and we hope that it might be useful. And of course, we could discuss about this later. So I just thought that I shared something really basic about, to some extent, our collective thinking about Site B specifically. Side B is a side of a story. It's a story, but it also can be a location, if you will, and it offers a fictional context. And that's I think the important aspect of it in relation to Site A, and that, of course, that fictional context will convey the era, the cultural, the social, and it's important to talk about contextualization, because if you break it down, as for example John O'Toole, he breaks the context of drama down to the real context, the concept of the medium. I mean, the real concept being, of course, it's slightly close to what Bones would identify as Site A. Is where the participants is living in. It's the social, the cultural, the era. And then he breaks it down into another context, which is called the context of the medium. In this case, is we're all trying to adapt drama and theater, although there's slightly there are overlapping areas between the 2 form. And then he breaks it further down into the concept of the setting, which is, if I understood correctly, is where do you really make the relationship between participants, the material, and the facilitator, and where does the drama actually happen? And then the fictional context. So there are many different layers to the contextualization. And I believe that the importance of considering it lies to several aspects. And I try to be as simple as I can, just basically presenting those areas. And if people are interested, we could discuss further. One is the importance of story. And of course, I came from a sort of a performance study background and traditional theater, and in that world, it's become crazy and crazy, and people talk a lot about performativity and ideas into the real world, and the ideas of adapting a real sense of coming into the drama world from what they would consider the real. And when I first start entering this specific field, and I got a lot of education on how that in process drama or drama education, that you ought to use lots of strategies. You have to come up with lots of different conventions, different angles of looking at the situation, and come at it from different perspective and from different distances. And I think that it's quite interesting of the contrast, why a lot of people are more drawn into the idea about taking the real situation and taking the personal stories, or taking the real setting in O'Toole's world to be the context of the drama, in comparison to, say, to storify a situation, to use a fictional. And I think it's very interesting how much we're leaning towards one or the other side. And once I started to get to know more about the concept and the notion of sight, and I start to really make connections between that different settings, the participants, the facilitator, and the situation itself. And it seems to me a lot of the time when we're practicing what David would call the convention drama, more of a convention-based drama, we use a lot of strategies to come at it or come around it. It seems that there are lots of disconnection between the facilitator, the participant, and situation. Of course, I'm talking a lot about my context, but I'm not surprised that this is also to some extent the same context of the whole entire field. So I think that's one area. Is how do we understand the story itself amongst human beings, and why we always tend to storify when we want to express ourselves, when we explain something that either objectively true, that is objectively happen, or something that we deeply feel. And when we talk about relationships, our interactions generally in life, we often storify these things. So it seems to me that it's difficult not to really use it as a totality of either a starting point of a drama, or a general perspective into thinking about the relationship between facilitators, participants, and the material. And I think that's one thing that's quite interesting for me in thinking about. So you have considered about side A, you have considered about the general context of the participants. How do we not directly attach a kind of a way of narrating it, or way of reading it, or way of practicing it, rather finding the sort of the parallel fiction world that allow the participants and the facilitator to make collectively. And that's where David talks a lot about the angle of connection lies in. And in a way, if you could think about this collective, the angle of connection is largely to do with considering the linking between A and B for me. And I think by offering a consistent logical situation where it's easier for the participants to get into the totality of that particular situation, in which the narrating about ourselves, or considering about ourselves, considering us being in a situation, is much easier than finding a different angle to it, or finding a very distant, or finding a kind of almost like a strange way, of defamiliarized way of entering the story. And a second point connects to what Bond says about that threefold, that three minds, the actor, the role, and the audience. He talks a lot about when an actor performs on stage, you are dealing with your own minds, of course, and your consciousness in relation to the role and the role's minds. And then, of course, all this also would be perceived and would enter a kind of a threefold exchange into the audience minds. And he talks a lot about the relationship between the actor's mind and the role's mind. and how does that enter into the psyche, specifically the audience mind. And I think that's where the second connection that I'm trying to make, which is if you put the participants into being the role rather than trying to, again, to use my word, come at it from a different angle, come around it from a different angle, using different strategies or conventions to try to reason with it, right? Try to reason through it. It again, for me, is much more convenient and easier, and provide much more safety in the sense that you are in that duality of it. And the idea about risking into being in a situation, being in a state, is much more fun to play around within that duality. And I think that's another useful thinking into. So rather than taking the participants out to protect them, whether it's because the materials we think is too close to them, whether we think that it's easier for them to find a different angle perspective to it, or it's much easier for them to reflect. It might be also useful to consider providing the safety or protection necessary to go into a drama by being in that duality, that state of duality, being in that minds of almost similar to an actor, the relationship between an actor and the role. And I think last time David was opening up a great and a great area where we could talk a lot about that duality within the role, what really happened in there, particularly for the participants or actors' consciousness in relation to that role. How does, whether metaxis is a real thing, or is something that's that we think it's just a nice word that we think theoretically makes sense, but it doesn't really show. My own experience that I think kids and participants are always in that duality, even when they're playing, even when they're using, even simply as a child holding a doll to do something that they were, my kid was just holding a doll to watch a TV for the entire TV. Even in that sense, there's a sense that little playing has a sense of duality in it, that is not totally separate from each other, that is deeply connected to each other. And if it's framed and if it's protected correctly, if it's considered a lot to do with the angle of connection enough, then I think it could really excavate that specific situation rather more interestingly, and it risks more. It brings the play much more interesting. And I think the third areas that I want to touch upon is by considering about the fiction or the fictionalization of that specific side A. It also constrains the facilitator or the drama maker, whoever is leading the session, much more, because the fictional story will offer a kind of a specificality of it. So it offers a constraint within that specific situation, rather than, again, to use my word, coming at it. You excavate, almost like really excavating a site. You dig from within, and then it offers much more constraint necessary to build the dramatic and pedagogical, to use Bolton's word, is both dramatic and pedagogical, and it tends to prevent, I think, the participant to abstract through it. And I think the last sort of areas that I want to touch upon is if I dare, is this kind of a consideration about the subjectivity and objectivity. And I think that's another extremely useful area that Bones offers to us thinking about. So if you open with a much more almost like mundane situation, and that's where lots of Bones plays opens up with, it connects easily to the participants to commit to that, to commit to a situation, and why it's easier, because it also seems like that you're looking at something that's just happening as a thought in your own mind, which is actually almost like the effect when you're in the theater watching, when you're in the dark watching the stage. It's almost like that you're watching a kind of a situation within your own mind. And it's really crucial for the role play later. And it connects with how does the human contradiction, which is often the center of his play, and I think to a large extent what we're after here is the human contradiction, the things that really easily open up the situation, but it's projected onto often an object. So it's not an abstract a narration of that human contradiction. It's often projected onto that objectivity. So it's not really easy to get around with it, if you know what I mean. It offers a kind of practicality of it. If you think about the situation between the phone and the teacher, you can't really contextualize that specific situation without considering what's in the phone. I mean, in a way you can, but it will be too abstract, and you will lose a lot of opportunity for me to explicate what really lies between them, what really in that exchange. So later you will see a different consideration about what's in the phone, and how come the girl doesn't want to hand out the phone. And I think that opens up a lot of it also protects the participant, because it's not very easy to just say, this is how I think, this is how I project it psychologically, this is how I subjectively think, because it's an object there. It has to be placed somewhere. It has to be played in a situation. B, I think it's easier to enter the totality of the situation, also because that there's an object placed at the center of the situation, so that it contains all these sites, if you will, but not necessarily being metaphorically understood, or it's been metaphorically occupied. It doesn't really filled with an existing meaning to it, even though I think whoever is offering that situation might have a kind of direction, where does it go. And I think it shows clearly in me working through approaching Kostas' situation. And I was really working through strongly how does that phone plays at the center of it, rather than thinking, so what sort of concept that I'm trying to embed this whole in, or how do I use different strategies to make participants participate or reflect or feel in the situation. And C, I think that also centralize your drama, because it's easier for the participants to get into a fiction, to get into a sort of protected way of exploring the situation, excavating the site. But it's also quite easy to lose a kind of the purpose of it, the objective of it. It's by having a kind of fiction, by offering children or young people to make that piece of fiction, it often, in the middle of the process, it would offer a lot of useful connection between the logic of the situation, each aspect of it, and that helps centering our exploration into the specificality that I was talking about. So I think that's how I would consider the importance of Side B specifically in relation to contextualization. Of course, there are a lot of other areas that might be embedded into the idea about size. I struggle a lot with, years ago, I started to try to really explore placing all these concepts, into the idea about size. I kind of gave that up because I thought it was, now everything is connected. And I think this might be useful to discuss later or debate with each other. I think there's always a little bit of A, B, and C, and D in almost every situation. And so that phone is part of the A as well. But that phone is part of the B. And I think the problem with having to consider in this way, and of course you always have to break it down into things like this. But once you mention about A, B, C, D, it's very easy to fall into a kind of a compartmentalization, thinking, oh, so this is specifically to that. Even I think when you consider too much about the interrelations between each layer, I still think that it might make this whole thing more of a kind of a tax driven that you have to fill in. But I found it over the years easier to focus just on the situation. If we commit entirely to that situation between the men and the students, and I think that, and if you go into that, there surely would have lots of connections. That if you follow the logic of the situation, and it will come all this connection between the era that they're living through. How do I protect them into being in that situation will come naturally. So that's my question in the end. That whether how do we really connect with both sides, and how do we draw into embedding these so-called classic concept about drama and education into the idea about sides. And I think one area that might be useful to talk about is protection interrel, because we're not taking, so say we put that situation in front of the participants, but we're not really taking them right in. So there are lots of process of considering what sort of preparation we need. How do we build the ownership of the participant? How do we make sure that they want to actually mate with us? How do they feelingly get through being prepared into being that role? And how do they, once they're in that role, how do we make sure that they commit to that, the constraints of the drama? How are we usefully bringing them also the technique of drama and theater and help them prepare being in that situation? How do we make sure that they got into the psyche? How do we make sure that they are in that duality, in that metaxis? So there are lots of questions I think still remain to be discussed. And I'm going to stop there. I hope that's useful into thinking about conceptualization.
All right, thank you very much, Cao Xi. Very useful, thank you. It seems like that's placing a lot of questions we can explore in these sessions, not only in this one, the next one as well, because I think Cao Xi went into also presenting a protection to role and other things that relates with side C, I would say. But I think it's a very interesting beginning. Now, I think the next step for us is to present quickly the 5 different developments of the situation with a mobile phone in a schoolyard in Athens, this drama, and then just to remind people, I'm sure that many of you have read already all the developments which are on Padlet. So just reminding a few things, and then or even justifying. And then we're going to go to breakout rooms, and then we'll talk more about general discussion on the 5 developments. So may I ask Adam to start?
Yes, of course. I was just actually trying to copy the link to the Padlet into the chat.
I'm going to do it.
I've already done it, so it's fine.
Okay.
But that's why I was a bit slow. Thanks, Cao Xi, for this introduction and setup. Actually, I mean, to be honest with all of you, I mean, we've had a chat about it. I was a little puzzled by the task I got from Kostas and Cao Xi to prepare for today, which was to sort of think of the context, because as a practicing drama teacher, I immediately started structuring a drama lesson rather than thinking about the whole context of the situation. And then I was a little bit frustrated with everyone about giving such a task about thinking about the whole situation and the context rather than the steps of building the drama. but then I had to do my task again, and I sort of wrote this whole situation, the context, and actually it was quite useful. But maybe I'll talk about that in the reflection, or we can talk about that later, why I found it useful. Anyway, the situation, I kept it in Greece, the situation, even though I would be working on it in Hungary with students. And what the context for me is a sort of breakdown in the education system, and also a sort of ingenuity about this whole breakdown and the collapse. I see ourselves living in a country that looks democratic, but there are some fundamental features that are missing, but it still looks like a democracy if you look at it, you know, from the basic things like you can vote and stuff like that, the different parties and stuff. I don't want to get into that, but this is the sort of context in the school as well. So this, I would be focusing on the schoolyard, which I think it's in a really deprived social area, but in a struggle to keep its students. So there's the whole question of the commodification of the education system as well in it. And it's a schoolyard that the council has just given money, or the state has just given money to renovate. And what they've done with it is they've whitewashed the walls. So all the graffiti and everything has been painted over, and a lot of CCTV cameras have been fixed, and the headmaster of the school is really pushing for the school to ratchet up the security and have zero tolerance on bullying, and have really strict rules, and get the students to keep them, and forcing the teachers to sort of police the students. It's also something very relevant in Hungary. We have one policeman in every school. So this is the sort of context I'd like to set up, and actually, you know, the whole question of pretense and reality, the real situation, and covering it up would be one of the centers of the drama. So I've defined the center as how far do we allow ourselves to be pushed into the role assigned to us by authority. That's what I would be focusing on. That would be the center of the drama lesson. I haven't read the whole text. It's on the Padlet with a lot of details, but that's the sort of basic situation that would go on. And the student mobile phone is there because she needs to reach her family, and there are some real difficulties at home, while the teacher also has a mobile phone, and the teacher's child, you know, the gender could be either male or female, but the teacher's child is at home ill, and that's another connection between them, but that's a situation that will sort of context that will develop. Sorry if I was too long, Kostas.
No, you're fine. Thank you, Adam, for this. Now, Chris, would you mind to offer yours?
Like Adam, I chose to continue with the situation in Greece, and I think that was principally because I've been there for myself for nearly a month, and also because, interestingly, from working in the UK and Malta and Greece with young people since the turn of the year, I'm really struck by how similar the social sites are, and how resonant this situation is. And I just wanted to, I'm not going to go through the whole situation in any real detail. It's on the Padlet. But I think just looking at site A, and picking up on the point that Cao Xi made in his introduction, that a little bit of A, B, C, and D is in everything, is really important, because there's such a dialectical connection between the parts when you get the totality of the situation. But of course, the site A that is global is this social, political, cultural, ecological crisis, neoliberalism, the rise of fascism, and a drive to war. And that is very much a global context that resonates throughout the so-called developed world. And of course, the 2008 financial crisis really was where I would argue that the post-capitalist society that's emerging really began to take shape. And while I was in Greece, the train crash, which was at first put down to human error rather than the wanton privatization, the commodification of all aspects of human life, where profits put before people, resulted in the tragic loss of 57 lives, has brought about an incredible outpouring of grief. And I experienced many demonstrations in Athens in the last 2 weeks. And as one of my colleagues said to me the morning after the crash, it's not an accident, it's a crime. So in the sense that the side A of this crisis of a post-capitalist society, as I would argue, is present in site B. And so when you get specific about the crumbling railways, the poor roads, the education system, the hospitals, all very familiar to us here in the UK. I think it's particularly intense in Greece. But like Cao Xi again, I always find it's really important to focus on the situation and be as specific as we possibly can. So I want to focus very much on the ongoing crisis in Greece as it's manifested, particularly in Greece, amongst the public education system, working class youth, and how that's embodied in the clash over a mobile phone. And of course, I'm really focusing on the particular elements that Kostas built into his original situation. The immiseration of the middle class through the teacher situation, his need to ingratiate himself into the system in order to maintain some full-time employment, and at the same time a clash with his own conscience in terms of how he should relate to his students, and then of course the particular student herself, her family problems, which is why she needs the phone, but also her relationship to her own education and the economic pressure that she experiences. So I think that this conflict, which arises from objectively a authoritarianism that is expressing itself in all of our institutions, which is about control, and the human need that a young person feels to be connected, not only with their family, but with their identity, is really drawing me to a center of exploring the tension between values and rules and individual and institutional choices, what's just, what's unjust, and how it impacts upon and shapes our lives. And I'm working with binaries of justice, injustice, values, rules, family, school, teacher, students. And then what I tried to outline was my specific need to start with really building the absolute clarity of what that schoolyard and the attending buildings are and what is on the other side of the school fence, through depiction work, really considering the condition of the building, what the state of the yard is, how the yard is, what the neighboring buildings overlooking the school are like, and then begin gradually to focus upon the particular individuals in the story, not just the teacher and the student, but the watching head teacher and the witness, other teachers, other students and parents who go about their business, as a way of slowly bringing a number of tasks from teacher in role to collective role to group improvisation through pair work, to really begin to immerse ourselves in that situation, and particularly to hold us in that contradiction where the teacher wishes to be accepted and come closer to the students, and at the same time a student who is not there voluntarily yet feels compelled to be there in the hope of finding greater employment, and where the school rules directly intervene between both their social and political and individual needs. But I won't go into the details of how we're going to do it yet. That's for another point, I suppose.
Well, yeah, I think that would be very useful for the next session, Chris, also. Thank you very much for that.
Okay.
Now, Cao Xi, would you like to share yours? Unmute. Can you unmute?
Sorry. So yeah, again, I'm not going to go through all the details again, but I thought it'd be interesting just to outline my considerations and how I was working. So I was reworking the same situation back to China. Obviously, I don't know anything about the situation in Greece, but I found that exchange between the students and the teachers very, very interesting because it's present in our culture in the city. You could see everywhere, but slightly different. And one of the my way in is this one of the backgrounds that I want to give you is that we passed a new regulation in 2021 called Regulations on School Discipline for Primary and Secondary Teachers. It's just a draft, but I was considering Site B, trying to place it in maybe 5 years later when it become a law. So just to give you a little bit taste on what that draft is. So in the draft, it actually protects teachers to discipline children and young people, and you give them lots of strategies, lots of useful conventions, things like name and shame, make oral and written apology, additional physical exercise. These are all taken from the existing draft, by the way. Forced standing, isolation, suspension, and all that. And also, of course, the draft also say that it prohibits punishment and direct cause of physical pain to students. And I think that's my way into considering about the situation, which is in very close future, in near future, that law is presented. So there are lots of, again, CCTV cameras being installed. One of the way I protected my participant into is to consider a lot of footages captured by the camera in which one student or a group of students are disciplined. And so that's one background. Another background is, I don't know how familiar you are, but in China, if you want to go to the so-called first tier city like Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen, that you have to, the students, if you're not from those 4 cities, you can't actually attend the final exams. So you will be sent home to take the most important exam, the Gaokao. And so the validation is quite an issue for students. So I set that up for the student role into being a transient student. So she's transferred to temporarily to this school, which I'm setting up as a working class marginalized school. So they have lots of issues with young people, and the registration law means that actually we're building borders within the state, if you will. So if you don't have a so-called like a green card equivalent, you can't buy a house in Beijing or Shanghai. Your kids cannot really attend exams here. So that's where also my concerns for the young teacher in my case. So instead of fictionalizing him as a middle-aged man, for me, I reset the age of the role as a 23 years old, just graduated, extremely inexperienced teacher, looking for a registration to stay in Beijing. So he actually got an offer from a better school, but he decided, but that better school doesn't offer him the registration, so he can't stay and become a Beijinger. So he chose this school, which he knew there are a lot of discipline issues, because the school offered him the registration, but only after he passed the tryout period. So this happened during the tryout period. And he was asked by another, again, I put in the document, a wonderful invention of our Ministry of Education from 2021, which is called the moral principle. So every school is appointed a moral principle to guide teachers to execute the law of at the moment, the regulation of disciplining students. So he found out that this girl was fiddling with her phone during one of the breaks, and he asked the young teachers to go discipline her, to take the phone back, and to return it to her at the end of the school. And another way of building into the girl is that she's not really she has some validation issues with her classmates. So she was in the WeChat group again, for those who you don't know, WeChat is our life, is our being, it's the social media plus Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, everything combined together, and your credit card, obviously. So everyone's got one, and she got into a group of her classmates, and she's joining a dare. The dare is to take as much as photos of your teacher during school and make them a meme. And that's just been, like in underground school life, just been transforming children, students' life into something really fun. So they all they care going through the school for a day is to find teachers, possible teachers, and take them as much as photos. And they have lots of competitions, and they rank a lot of different memes. So a video is much more valuable than photos. So the girl hasn't got much, and she was all day trying to take pictures of the teachers, and she was found out by the moral principal and asked to discipline her. So she couldn't hand out easily the phone because she know that the phone's it has lots of teachers min in it. I think this is the basic thing that I was working from. So discipline law, registration. I think my situation was a lot to do with exploring validation. I think in a way that both, the reason I put the role of the 23 years old rather than the middle age is that they're actually rather in the same situation if you think about it. But they obviously, unfortunately, were sort of jammed into this little area which CCTV camera caught on. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Cao Xi. Very useful as well. David, would you like to do it, or is it not? You have to unmute. Can you unmute, please? Unmute.
Okay, can you hear now?
Yes, we can.
Guys, I'm really sorry. I haven't sort of had my head on properly today, and I should have anticipated. I can't read out what I wrote. So if anybody else wants to read out what I've written, that would be fine. But I can't. I should have anticipated and prepared. And
no, it's okay. I think most of the people have read it already. I don't know. But
okay, all right.
Because it's on Padlet.
Okay.
So unless you want to add something, it's fine, I think.
No, I just find it very interesting what the other guys are doing. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to speak about mine, my development, a little bit, not too much, because actually a lot of the other speakers already described much of what I thought as well. So I think what I'm interested to look at is that actually in having in mind side B, actually what we're trying to do is to find a story which is recognizable. And this is what I've tried to do with my development, as well as the initial idea. Something which is recognized, is a daily thing. It's a daily routine, actually, in Greek schools. What is happening with the mobile phone or other stuff which the students might bring in. I'm interested a lot on letting students, the participants, to bring in ideas, their own experiences. So when they do graffitis, for example, on the wall, I'm sure they're going to bring in what they have seen or they have written themselves. Now, trying to find ways of making a story recognizable and at the same time speaking side A, bringing in side A, that's the most important question in my point of view. And I thought that I was looking for a view of voice for side A, and I thought that would come probably by the head teacher and office of the teachers in schools. So that's why I've chosen as well in the story to include what is happening in there, what is happening in the office, and what the head teacher is saying, what kind of talk he's bringing in and what kind of demands he's bringing in, because in some sense he's bringing in the demands of society on the school, on teachers, and on students. So I focused a lot on teachers' points of view, head teacher and the teacher as well. And the other thing I wanted also to focus on, it's the mobile phone, which I thought it was a very important object. I'm not sure I understand what mobile phone means for this generation. To be honest, I don't know. It's not simple. It's not simply contacting others or connecting to others. There's something more there which I don't understand myself. That's why I have felt the urge to focus on that and see what is happening there. And it's a very interesting object. Technology came from technology, and you know, smartphone can do a lot of things there. But what does it mean for each one of these people? It's something that, I don't know, we need to explore and maybe understand. I'm not sure if you can understand, but I think we should keep it under focus. So through this object, I thought we could develop the history of the lady, of the young woman. What is in there? What kind of messages? To whom? Or videos, or images, or photographs, or whatever. You know, there's a whole world in a phone which could reveal what is happening not only on this person, in this person who owns the phone, but others. So I thought that is a very, very important object to focus on. And in relation to the story, it has to do with, you know, who is this person, the teacher, what is expecting from himself and from his work in this school. Let's see the story of this person, how he came here, why, what are the hopes and dreams he's having. And I think the phone will also show us, help us to explore what's the lady, the history of the lady, the story of the lady. And in relation to the schoolyard, for example, I think it's very important for the story, to develop the story, to focus on how is this yard. I mean, others have said that already, like Chris and I think Adam as well, very well. I mean, it's a similar approach. The location has to be very clear. And I think one missing point, maybe, is what at least in Greece is I mean, students are very familiar with, is the hidden place. In almost all the schools have a kind of a hidden place where students are gathering, and then all sorts of things may happen. And in some sense, in my mind, this thing brings in a kind of uncontrolled space where, you know, students may develop things that teachers do not know or they cannot control. In some sense, it's bringing in a gap maybe to control of the teaching, of the schooling, etc. Now, this is my main idea, and this center, if I could say that I had a center in this site B development, is related with what is at stake here in relation to what a society is expecting from the school, teachers and students at the same time, and how teachers and students internalize this thing, how they react towards that, what is the impact on them, what does it mean on them, all these expectations from society. And when I say society, I don't mean only neighborhoods, but, you know, the school system, education, the Ministry of Education, the state, or the government. Now I don't want to go in depth or to mention more details on what is happening in Greece, because I'm going to get really moved by that, and I don't want to know, because there are a lot of developments about the deaths and about the train crash, about what is happening in education. But my main concern, let's say, is how we can create this story, which is familiar, acknowledged, easy to recognize by the students and bring in side A and all the contradictions and the conflicts that are happening in side A. That's it from my point of view. So I think now we are going to go into breakout rooms, and you had in the email sent by Insight, you had a kind of a task. It's not a compulsory task. It's more like a proposal. If you like to work more on this development, to collect some questions or areas which you are interested in. So we're going to go into these breakout rooms now, 4 breakout rooms, and we're going to talk a little bit on that. It's again, it's a discussion, and we need the help of yours. It's not something like, teaching or asking, doing a task or something like that. More like opening a discussion to more people, and then we'll come back again and put them together, try to put them together. That's the main aim. So 4 groups. Adam, Cao Xi, Chris, and David, and me don't accept the invitation because we're going to put you in particular groups. So when you have the invitation, the rest of you just accept it and you go into breakout rooms, and some other Cao Xi, Chris, Adam, and me will join as well.
Yeah, don't worry, I've been more authoritative, and you'll be automatically moved into the breakout room, so you don't even need to accept the invitation. Just go there.
All right. Okay.
So I've already done
All
that, right. and you will be joining you, and we have 14 minutes for discussion.
Yeah.
And then we'll be moving. I'll be moved back. So see you in the breakout rooms. See you there. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Hi.
David, do you need a break? Should I put you out of the breakout room? Or are you happy to stay?
Hi, David.
Okay.
He's muted.
You're muted. You're muted. Anyway, David, you're muted, so we can't hear you. Now it's good.
No, I'm just happy to be here.
Okay.
You guys carry on.
Okay. Great. So,
sorry, Adam. I have to say that I really want to thank you for offering to me the chance to attend the seminar, but I have to leave very quickly.
See you, Avra. Thanks.
Yeah,
that's
because
nice.
I am in charge of another seminar.
Okay.
It starts in 5 minutes.
Have a good evening, and
thanks
for
a
being
lot.
here so far.
Thanks a lot.
And it's great to see you all. And I've talked far too much so far, and all of us have talked, and you've been far too silent, of course, because we didn't give you a chance to talk. But it would be really interesting to see your thoughts, and it's so nice to have esteemed colleagues here on the whole question of contextualization. I found it really, in relation to sequencing as well, or structuring the work and all that. I'm really curious on what your thoughts are that came up through these discussions.
Just one thing that really kind of did grab me really was partly because I came across it before in a different sort of context, is the hidden place, the hidden space that young people must find that is free of the adult gaze, and how much the adult or the authoritarian gaze must try and find that hidden space, in a sense. There used to be, when they used to, people used to, the hobos used to ride the trains in America. There used to be a point on the trains that you could, between carriages, that you could go on where you couldn't be seen. And it had a particular name. I can't remember it typically. But yeah, and that just that, it's just a thing, you know, that really stood out for me at some point. Again, Adam, it would be to do with sequencing, but at some point to explore the hidden space.
I thought we were the only ones that had a hidden space. When we were 13, we used to go in the cupboard, eat chocolate, and bitch about everybody and everything. Never occurred to me that everyone has, all schools have a hidden space. Of course they do, thinking about.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it's the whole whitewashing thing in Hungary, but I think that's really related to the freedom of bringing that in a drama into a Greek school. So I mean, it's really impolite, but I don't know too much about Greece, so I don't know what's happening there. But for the students in Hungary, it also gives a freedom to look at the situation in Hungary. So that hidden space for me would be what's under, you know, what's been whitewashed, what are the graffitis that are under or behind, you know, the lower layer, and we might be working through that as well in a task. So what's invisible and what's being covered up, because I think that really relates to the context here, that, you know, things are being covered up all the time.
That resonates with the whole thing we was talking about last week in terms of, you know, what's forbidden, and you know, the super ego, and you know, like what gets repressed or covered up.
Hi, I'm Christina.
Hi, Christina.
I'm in Norway, and I'm a colleague of Kostas at the moment, and I don't know any of you. But what I was thinking when I listened to this, it was the difference in society that are presented, and for me, living in Norway, would be we could say that we don't have that kind of this strict discipline, that maybe some would feel that, wow, the teacher actually should get more opportunities to actually set some borders. It's a lot of discussions about maybe the pupils' freedom and rights, and to be allowed to do what they want. And if the teachers say something, they can just call their lawyer in a way to say, you are not allowed to take my mobile phone. But I think that the pupils of today, I have two children that have finished this, they are 16 and 20. And I when they went to school also, it was a big issue about the mobile phones. And so they felt watched, they felt disciplined, they felt that the rules were not fair, because they have to hand in their phones before lessons. But then again, it's a wobbling rules. And what I was thinking about reading this, I was thinking about maybe, and that's issues for our society in a way, the dilemmas of also taking a phone from maybe a student that don't have friends, and they have this phone like hanging on to, like, I'm also busy, I'm looking into something, I am. So taking that, you will like let them all alone, because if they have the phone, they can actually sit and it looks like they're doing something. So that's that kind of dilemma. So it's more on the issue of the students. Yeah, that was just some quick thoughts from me, from Norway.
Thanks, Christine. It's really good to hear. I was wondering what would be really interesting in Norway in this situation. So what would it be that would engage the students? You know, because we have it so easy. There are so many problems to engage with here.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, the whole thing about the phone and the self, and how in a way the self is split, or the identity is split between me and my phone, and how much of me is it that's there, and how much of it is that's here. That's something that would be really interesting to engage with or open up in some way at some point through the situation. Perhaps I don't know how, but I think there's a lot of potential there.
The phone's a hidden space as well, I think, and a public space.
Yes, that's really interesting. That's really interesting. And who is it hidden from? Bye, Avra.
The only thing I want to say is that as far as Greece is concerned, there are rules about the phone, but they are not strict. And there are many teachers who use and make profit of the phones because they use it in the lesson for many activities. So as far as I'm concerned, I wouldn't think it was a big problem, such an issue. For some people, it might be scary to have students with a phone, for some teachers, but it doesn't happen to all of them. So I wouldn't imagine that it could be such an important issue to have so many conflicts. I don't know. It might be for some teachers, not for all. This is my experience from the Greek education.
Yes, but that's what gives it the potential, I think,
I know,
people see something completely different in the same object. So for one person, it's a threat, and for the other person, it might be having something to hold on to, or the community, or a friend, or something like that.
I agree, but it might be a threat also for the teachers in the way that there are some students who use their camera just to take a photo or a video from the teacher while he's teaching or while he's speaking to other students. There are many events that can happen. Yep. I'm sorry I cannot stay longer. However, I just wanted to
you shared
to give you some information from my experience.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being with you.
Thank you, Avra. Dagmar, what's the situation in Austria? Do you want to?
I was late and I'm not prepared, and I'm not sure if I understand everything, but to continue the Avra's talking, it's not only the video students take. If there is some accident or something which is extraordinary, there is no need to help the other person first. And in there was some burning in the facilities, and the children didn't look for help, someone, or to make the fire go. Just everyone took his video, and they made a video, and in, I don't know, half an hour, all their friends got the video. And this was really a very crazy experience. And some of the speakers was talking about there's something in the mobile which we in our generation don't understand really, because we didn't raise up with this. And I think this is true.
This is the whole question of the virtuality of action and or the real or the actual action, or
maybe there are the video games and all the second life and whatever existing, that the students, the young people are in different rooms. They have different rooms, different universes where they live, and this is surely something which I cannot really understand or cannot really see.
It's very interesting what you say, because their body isn't there. Their head's there, but their body's not in this other room. Their body's somewhere else, but they've left it.
yes, and this whole separation creates an interesting space as well. Or this, but it's I think that's really interesting, Kate, what you're saying about which part is where and how much of my head is there.
Because in trauma, your body has to be there.
You weren't.
Well, I have to ask people who were talking just seconds before it stopped. I'm sorry for this, but it was 15 minutes from the beginning. So I'm sorry, Stig. You were in the team I was also. You were interrupted. I'm sorry for that.
I'm so sorry. I said that really drastic. It's a sort of setup going towards the session on the tragic, how it finished.
Okay.
we were in a really interesting beginning, a really interesting discussion as well.
Yeah. I mean, we started also. We need for this discussion. I think we need some like 5 or 7 minutes just to warm up a little bit and then start, talking. So yeah, I'm just mentioning some few things that came up in the group I was. Now there was a question in relation to not in a kind of critical question, more like wondering the differences between this approach and a Brechtian approach. We didn't go into details, but we thought that, well, maybe that's an area we need to look at more carefully sometime. There was this. It was expressed, for example, that there are some difference, but generally speaking, it doesn't seem like not Brechtian. Anyway, I don't know if I'm expressing it in right words, but another area which came up was how recognizable is this story to different contexts, different countries like Norway, for example, or Hungary, and Greece, and there was this feeling that it is recognizable, but in different forms at some point. I mean, certainly side A might not be exactly the same in Greece as in Norway, but there might be common ground inside a wider context, which actually impacting Norway as well as Greece, but it's expressed in different forms, maybe. And how this story might change in relation to different countries, different contexts. What is recognizable there or not? For example, I can say I can add here that CCTV in Greece might not be a kind of a recognizable element. There are no schools with CCTV. I mean, watching students in the schoolyard. If I'm wrong, if other Greek people can I don't know add here, but as far as I know, there are no.
It's prohibited, Costa. It's prohibited to have CCTV in the school.
Yeah.
And in the schoolyard, we can have it out of school, out of the schoolyard, not just out of the school building, out of the schoolyard, not inside.
All right, so I think this is the right. So it depends on the context and how you can use you can use the story to match the context you're working in. Generally speaking, these areas were the ones that came up. I don't know if I'm wrong. The people who were in the group can come in and speak for yourself. But I think that anyone can, of course, offer his view from now on, and you can report for your own group or speak for your own self.
I think maybe because of time, I think it would be more interesting rather than give a report back on each group. If you just bring one thing that was interesting, we had a really interesting beginning discussion on one hand on hidden spaces, and then on the separation of the head and the body as well, and that's how that relates to virtual spaces. But I don't know, Kate just started saying something about trauma, and I'm quite interested in hearing that. I don't know if you want to continue on that, Kate.
I could say a couple of things about it, because when you're on your phone, your mind and your body aren't attached to it. Your mind's in your phone. But when you're in role, your mind is in your body. And I think I wrote a thing about Greek drama. I'm obsessed with the skeina in Greek drama, which is the screen at the back of the stage where obscene things happen. And the thing about a mobile phone is there's no obscene space on it, like there is at the Theatre of Dionysus. At the Theatre of Dionysus, people go off stage to be murdered. You know, all the horrible stuff happens off stage. And I think it's a real mistake to see that as protecting the audience from, visual horror and visual spectacle. Because I think you're much more closely connected to things you can't see. You can't get away from them. And your imagination is triggered. And I was thinking, when you're in role, shut me up if I'm going on for too long, but one more thing to say. When you're in role, your imagination's triggered. And I got very interested when I was teaching drama in education to my students in what people saw when they were in role. And I used to say to them, what did you see? And they'd say, oh, there was a red carpet. And there's no red carpet. We're in the drama studio, everything's black. It's almost as if when you're in role, everything is beyond. Everything is in the obscene space. It's the beyond. It's the stuff you can't see. And I think that's site D. I think that's Bond says it's the site of the audience imagination.
Okay.
But yeah, so I think we don't look beyond our phones, and that's the problem with them.
Okay. So if I understand well, Kate, you're talking about the phone being a central object in a drama like that, or not? I wasn't sure I understood that.
I'm just talking about phones in general being the antithesis of drama, really, because they sort of split. They make you split. And drama puts you in your body.
Okay. That's an interesting input. Thank you, Kate, for that. Is there anyone else who would like to add something? Because we're running out of time, and I think we need to do that a little bit shorter. But I think we do have time to listen to other people if they want to.
Can I just reflect, sorry, on my experience of trying to work towards a drama structure and the experience of trying to devise a context for the situation and the difference between that? I find that really interesting as a learning for myself, actually, because I first, we had I think a very useful situation from Kostas, and I started planning a drama lesson leading up to that. So I was doing this sort of protection into role thing. And then when I realized I was doing it all wrong, I started to really imagine the context it is happening in and really trying to connect. And it really helped me understanding the situation deeper. And probably I'm you know, I have to do work too fast to give myself time to really think about that in detail and imagine the context of a situation, really to have all the layers. But I think then it offered me a completely different center and allowed me to really nail some new things for myself. So I think I've really found it was worth the time and the energy and the imagination, because it triggered my imagination in a different way than when I was sequencing. So that's just my my comment on that.
Okay, thanks Adam, thank you for this. Anyone else? Okay, so I think we need to go back to Cao Xi now, and I think he's trying to wrap up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, well, just also to reflect a little bit about our group, but we didn't really talk much about in terms of different form of thinking. Rather, we had lots of shared anxieties and concern about the young people's situation globally. I think that's a good way of sort of wrap this up. I think there are, obviously, in terms of theory, lots of areas that's still remain to be discussed, and all these things about the relationship between this approach to Brechtian approach. I found it fascinating about the recognition of the story as a beginning, as a starting point. How do we recognize that situation? What sort of things that specifically triggered the participants or the audience, if this is a piece of theater, to want to be engaged in it? And I found that quite interesting, because often, like Adam, you run into planning the whole sequence of it, and you kind of worked out a kind of a framework for it. But those specific small things, particularly at the beginning, for me, was quite a new way of looking at it. And then I think I found the whole thing about what do you see when you're in a role that Kate was sharing was quite interesting as well. I think also that's why adapting a kind of being that duality, being that approaching the metaxis effect is useful in a way, because there are a lot of things you can't really foresee. There are a lot of things you can't really devise before you go into it, and finding that being in a state is almost like a skill. I found in the context that I'm working with young people, and that's to do with the phone, are driven to not want to be in a state, and I think our society is a society without almost like a state. So whenever there's a situation happening around it, people tend to blind themselves with it. I just had my shared, experience working at the center, that I was just, sometimes you lose your patience. And then the whole center just found me last Sunday shouting at one of my colleagues, and we're shouting to each other, to be fair. And then everybody was just kind of sort of tune out. And I think that inability to be in a situation, because clearly is affecting your life. It's affecting, because it's not a nice sound, it's noise, or I was being overly criticizing, our colleagues and anything, but they found themselves having to be sort of outside that. And I think the phone is sort of making you that. It not only separate your own minds and body, I think it also kind of force you to be in that commentator role almost every second. So you found a kind of a murder scene, you found a atrocity in your phone, and you couldn't help but commenting on it. But you are not in it, and in fact, you're being drawn, way off from that specific the centered situation. So I think that's a bigger context. What sort of things that we select, and what sort of mode that we want our participants to be in. And I think in the days of us slightly more framed being into almost naturally a commenter of our life or other people's, I think being in the state is a skill that young people need to practice. They need to learn to be committing to it. So, I mean, that's all I wanted to say. That's what I'm thinking about now. I mean, I'm having lots of thoughts at the same time. So I just hope that you found this useful. That's us.
Good. Thank you very much, Cao Xi. Thank you for. Well, I think we are
right on time.
Yeah, we are on time. I think we are concluded. for today. Thank you very much for participating for this second session. I'm just reminding that there is another one coming, the third one, which is by David and me next time, and we're talking about side C from a Bondian perspective for drama, for process drama. So if you want to take part in that, to attend that, you need also to register. Again, every session is an individual session, and you need to register again. So to be sent the material, the relevant material. So I hope that it was a useful session for you. You created some questions, maybe some areas to think for. Thank you very much, Cao Xi, for your input and your effort for that. Very interesting and very clear. Hope to see you again. All the rest.
Sorry,
Take
before you say goodbye too much, I just wanted to. I've shared a feedback form. It's just one question. If anyone wants to give any anonymous feedback, questions, comments, requests, thoughts, ideas, inspirations, we are very happy to get that from you. It's anonymous. It's in the chat. Just do that. I'll put it in again so you see.
Well, yeah. If you want to respond to that, you need to do that. I mean, click on the link now before we close, because then it's lost. So if you want to do that, click on link and. You know,
but of course we also want to keep the Padlet, which is also being shared as a running space. So if you have, if you wake up in the middle of the night with some thoughts and you don't know what to do, then feel free to use that space for comments and thoughts, sharing any sort of material you like as well. So we just thought it would be a useful working space. So that's something we can use as well. We'll be getting back to you with emails also about the next session and when we have the registration, when we open the registration form for that. So we'll be.
Well, there are some inputs here. I mean, some questions. Let's say a person is asking if we could advance time next time. I don't know. We'll talk about it.
Are you suggesting, Vaishali, to start earlier?
Later, I think.
Or later. I'm not sure because Vaishali is writing from India. So I think it's the middle of the night there as well. Not only Cao Xi got up.
Okay,
at the
might be earlier then. That would be very difficult for Cao Xi, I think. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Please use the Padlet when you wake up, as Adam said, in the middle of the night, and you keep wondering. Use it. There's already some people already included some comments and questions. So it would be nice to see other people as well to start a discussion on various subjects on this approach. Thank you very much for today. Take care and see you next month.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.